taking us through that roundup. But moving on, let's shift focus to India's steel sector. Now, India's steel import landscape that is shifting very rapidly, with China's shipments down about 50%, Vietnam's surging on the other hand, and safeguard duties that is reshaping the cost structure as well. Let's get in conversation with Dhruv Goel, the CEO at Bigmin, to get us insights on what's driving this space. Hi Dhruv, very good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's first start by talking about the steel import figures that we did see earlier this morning. Now, imports from China and Japan, they have nearly halved, whereas Vietnam's have surged about 69%, if I get it correctly, in that April to August period. So is Vietnam primarily acting as a rerouter for Chinese and Japanese steel due to new duties, or is this a genuine increase in their capacity?
Okay, thank you, Kanishka, for having me on the show. So let me first, help you understand the imports dynamic in the Indian market. So India imports approximately, 4 million ton in the first 5 months of this financial year. Most of it came from South Korea, followed by China and Vietnam. So typically, India would import a lot of their cargoes in the form of flat steel, and flat will be also in the form of hot rolled coil, and most of it will come from your South Korea, China, Japan, and some portion used to come from Vietnam. But after the safeguard duty, which was imposed on flat steel, including HRC, the overall imports were impacted, and that is one of the reasons why the we have seen a drop in imports from Japan and China. To answer your other question, wherein there, on the contrary, the imports from Vietnam has increased significantly during this period. So one of the main reason is Vietnam exports a semi-finish, which does not come under the ambit of safeguard duty. And since Vietnam has free trade agreement with India, so a lot of these importers or mills, they rather than importing HR coil, they imported slabs, and then they converted into HRC. So that was one route where the steel was coming from Vietnam. And to answer your third question, whether it is a reroute of steel from Japan or China from Vietnam to India, no. So, as I mentioned, most of these volumes are in the form of semis. That is why the overall imports from Vietnam is seen on the higher side.
Understood. Thanks, Dhruv, for that update. But, you were just talking about the safeguard duty, right? So this 30% drop that we have seen for this period, April to August, in finished flat imports, that's the biggest decline among other categories, right? So I just wanted to understand what's the extent of the safeguard duty that has led to this has this raised the landed price to be uncompetitive? How is that scenario playing out?
So you're right, Kanishka. So the safeguard duty is applicable on the flat steel, and as I mentioned, that flat contributes the major lion's share of total Indian steel import. So it had a direct impact on the total import volumes. And after if you look at the current prices, imports would be expensive anywhere between 8 to 9% compared to the domestic prices.
Understood. And, Dhruv, now let's talk about the most recent development. We had the DGTR proposed anti-dumping duties on Vietnam and China, right? So just wanted to understand what's going to be the impact as and when these duties come into place once cleared by the Finance Ministry. How do you see that scenario playing out? How is it going to impact producers and consumers?
Yeah, so there are two things. The anti-dumping duty is being investigated on Chinese as well as Vietnamese mill. So I understand that Vietnam, they have already passed or they have approved the anti-dumping duty on HR coil. So we will see limited, volumes coming from Vietnam. China still it is under investigation. But the other important measure that has been taken by government for last few months, or I would say a couple of years, that they are not renewing the BIS license. BIS license is the license which is required for all the importers if they have to import cargoes to India. So that is also a non-trade barrier that has played a major role in restricting the volumes from, especially from the Chinese companies.
Understood. Understood. And about the DGTR proposal for duties on China, the recent one that came in, I just wanted to understand, while these duties are there, have been proposed to protect domestic steel producers, right? But what is your assessment of the cost impact that it is going to have on downstream steel consuming industries, like auto, construction, white goods? These rely on steel, right? So how are they going to be impacted?
Kanishka, the construction sector, anyways, they use, their consumption is in the form of long steel, which has a very limited share in the imported steel market. So the sectors which may get impacted would be your auto and white good. But in last few years, what we have seen that they have already shifted their purchases from import to domestic market. So Indian companies have also developed these competencies to serve to the downstream companies. Another step that has been taken by the steel companies is, they assured to the engineering export companies that they will give material at a export parity prices, so that they do not get impacted on the lower imports.
Understood, Dhruv. Thank you so much for that input. Well, that's all the time that we have for this interaction. On that note, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for taking us through all that's been shaping up in the steel sector of India. Thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.